Scott Vicknair, injury attorneys, we fight for the win.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Overrule Podcast, brought to you by the Scott Vicknair Law Firm. I'm here with my co-host and law partner, Brad Scott.
Good morning, everybody.
We are excited to bring you another hot topic that we have on deck for today. I don't know what I was about to say there, on something. Maybe I haven't finished this Diet Coke, so I'm not all really firing there yet, and I'm about to get in hangry mode because I haven't eaten lunch and it's like 12.
Well, you better get firing, because today we're gonna do a get to know episode. We're gonna peel back the layers on Mr. David Vicknair and learn a little bit more about him and his background and how he became a lawyer and what drove him in that direction and why would he do such a thing, and get to know you a little bit better and let our audience get to know you a little bit better. You up for that?
I don't really have a choice, because
No, you
you told me about 10 minutes before we went on the air that you were doing this, and I reluctantly have agreed, and so I guess I'm going to have to be a little bit vulnerable and do the one thing I hate doing, which is talking about myself.
Well,
so.
we ask these people all the time these questions, so you should be prepared for it. But
all right, let's go. I'm ready to do it.
But look,
Come
a
on.
lot of people out there don't know us personally. They don't know our background, so it's good. And look, David's a very well-accomplished person. You run a business.
Questionable.
So you know a little bit. I mean, you've made some of the mistakes that we talk about with other people. You've had some of these lessons and business lessons. So
Right.
I know these things with you because we talk about these things, but I take it for granted that the people out there don't know
That's
who
fair.
you are and
That's fair.
all those things. So,
About to get into a lot of my mistakes.
well, the quickest way to get to success is by making mistakes. So, but let's start kind of, for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, what your family relationships were like. Who are you as a person, David? Where do you come from? 'Cause I think they know you're a coon ass, but you're from one of those up the bayou coon asses. So,
well, now you're like jumping into like charter territory already, as you would know, because people from Galliano and Cutoff and Lower Terrebonne wouldn't see me as a coon ass, but people from New Orleans would. So I'm originally, as you know, from Thibodaux.
Lafourche Parish, for those of you out there don't know geography.
That's right. I went to college at Nichols and then law school at Loyola. And I have an incredible family. I have wonderful parents who I'm lucky to still have with me, mom and dad. And then a great relationship with my older brother, Benton, and his wife and their kids, Violet and Brady, who are ridiculously large now, and great kids, and really proud of them. And we have a huge extended family, like every South Louisiana person. It's like, how do you have 80 cousins and aunts? And we do. And it's like,
and for those who don't know, and I do know, David's extremely close with his family. Y'all do a lot of things together, which kind of gives what makes you who you are, I feel, as far as having that centered family that you've come from and stayed very close to, as recently as your mom being in one of your commercials.
She's on her superstar journey.
She is. How is she liking that?
She's in her TV era, as the Taylor Swift man said.
So
I actually talked to her this morning, and she said that the commercial must have just started airing because I'm getting all the text messages
all
this
her
morning.
Friends. It's good that you pulled her in there. I love to see it.
Somebody texted her, "A Star Is Born."
She's going to want to be in more commercials now, so you've maybe created a monster.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
And Miss Martha, if you're out there listening, I completely endorse the idea of you being in all the commercials.
She's better than me and you.
She is. We'll just let her be our spokesperson for a while. But let's kind of go back. You went to high school, you went to undergrad. What was the decision, or did you have any role models, or how did you make that decision? I want to be a lawyer, go to law school. What was your inspiration for that? What led you in that direction?
Yeah, this is a true story. So I played football and then played football a year at Nichols, and really wanted to go into coaching. I was kind of thinking I was going to either become a football coach or become a lawyer. And my dad, just coincidentally, is close friends with a coach from Thibodaux. His name's Laurie DuPont. Mr. Laurie, as some people may or may not know, he's retired now, but was a wildly successful high school football coach. I think Mr. Laurie probably won 4 or 5 or 6 state championships at West St. John, coached incredible athletes. On one team, he had Tyson Jackson and Quinn Johnson on the same team at West St. John, who both went to LSU and won a national championship. I think it was a 2003 LSU national championship team, or maybe 2007. And so he really was an incredible coach. And as a part of that process, my dad kind of like set up for me to go and coach with Mr. Laurie at West St. John. Absolutely loved it. Was incredible to watch him do what he did with the team there and the athletes and how he did it. He's a really good coach. And he and my dad both kind of talked me out of being a football coach.
Do you think there was a plan there for that?
There was definitely a plan. I mean, I don't think there's any 2 cents about it. They definitely like teamed up, but my dad was always really good about not forcing me.
Your
to
dad was
anything.
a coach too at some point.
He was.
Yeah.
Before Dad's been in insurance for 30-something years with New York Life, and their investment subsidiary Eagle Securities. But Dad was always very good about not trying to force me to do things. He wouldn't say you can't be a football coach.
That's the best way to get somebody not to do something.
Yeah, fair enough.
Especially a stubborn teenager.
Fair enough. Or a college kid who thought he knew anything when I really knew nothing. So they both had a influence on me kind of not going that route and exploring law school more. And part of the thinking, or I guess my thinking at the time, was in talking with Dad and considering whether to go coach or not coach, was, go to law school now. You can always go back and coach. If you have the interest in both, just go to law school and then see where this kind of goes.
All right. So that's where the journey begins. You went to Loyola.
That's right.
I know your employment history. I know where you started and everything else.
That's right. That's how I met you.
Yeah, that's how we met. But tell our listeners a little bit about that. The kind of things that you've done over your career to where you've gotten to now, where you're a founding partner of a law firm. But what's kind of the background? What's the progress there? How did you get to where you are now? What's been the path for you?
Yeah, so law school was great, and Loyola is a great school. Law school is great. Had a ton of good people that I still am friends with to this day. One of them is a lawyer here who I was in law school with. Mm-hmm. And being involved in moot court at law school was a big deal for me in my development as an attorney, because it really forced me to really get better in my oral advocacy skills and being, for non-lawyer words, just being an advocate in front of people, having to prepare, having to communicate. That was a huge deal.
There's a big difference between just arguing with people and actually presenting a case. I hear kids all the time, "Hey, I want to be a lawyer. I'm really good at arguing." That's not what we do.
No, I mean any 3-year-old, everybody who's got a kid who's listening to this, or in this room right now, knows any 3, 4, or 5-year-old can throw a temper tantrum and argue, but can you have an intelligent discussion and respectfully debate different points of an issue?
We're in the business of convincing people.
Correct.
That's a big difference.
Correct. And so that was a big piece of my development as an attorney. And then in law school, I was able to clerk at Favre, Demers, Russo, and Lutwicki, where you were the managing partner. And that's how we met. And I had a great experience clerking with Rhett Favre, who's a successful lawyer in New Orleans. Just a great old school lawyer.
Mentored both of ours.
Mentored both of us, coincidentally. And Rhett really, came up in a generation when settling cases was not as prevalent through mediation as it is now. And so Rhett must have tried 200 jury trials.
At least,
It's insane how much trial experience he has and that generation has. And so he offered me a job, and I loved him. I loved working for him. And so it was kind of a no-brainer because I didn't have any other job offers. Rhett had left Favre Demers while I was in law school and started his own practice. And so I went with him. I was not able to work with you there. And then was able to work with Rhett for 4 years outside of law school. And that was just the best experience for me ever, because Rhett was kind of at the stage in his career. We have such a big age gap. Me at the time being 26, Rhett was probably 60, 61, I guess, when I started practicing, maybe a little bit younger. But Rhett was kind of getting to the point in his career where he's like, I don't want to practice. I don't want to go to this hearing anymore. I don't want to have to prepare for court in the morning and get in an argument with the judge.
That's why he had you.
I don't want to have to take this deposition. I don't want to draft that. He just kind of let me go, and he was doing the parts of his practice at that stage that he wanted to do. And that, not every young lawyer coming out of law school, in fact, I would argue most don't.
That's definitely an accelerant that a lot of people don't have access to. Because, and David may be getting ready to say this, but, for a lot of people coming out of law school, you don't do a whole lot more than research and write for the first few years of your career a lot of times. Having that opportunity to sit in a deposition, go to court, and do things like that, that's not an opportunity that's afforded a lot of people at law school when they're first getting out and getting their law license. But that was an opportunity that you had with Rhett, which I think really was an accelerant and really got you going a lot faster than a lot of people maybe that's your age at this point.
Oh, no question about it. I remember one of my, trying a case is hard, and it's complicated, and there's a lot of preparation. and strategy and thinking through. You have to think about how something's going to play out in front of a judge or a jury. And I watched Rhett. I remember it was a terrible case he had. He did a great job with it. It was a judge trial in Jefferson Parish. And he took me. That was my first trial I remember watching. And I was just in awe of how like good he was at it. And he had an old foe of his who he did not get along with. So that was also pretty interesting to watch play out, them like battling each other the entire trial. But after that, Rhett would just like, he may have sent like somebody to come with me on I remember the first case I tried was in St. Tammany Parish. It was an equipment rental case. And he had a close friend at the time who he had come just sit with me and kind of like help me. But he would just send me. Like, and he sent me like we had a big case in St. Charles Parish. He was like, I'm not coming with you. Go. You're going to do fine. You're ready. And so.
It also helped that you were a very bright, intelligent, good lawyer coming out of law school.
I mean, that's very humbling.
Why you're sitting
that's
here
very
today with
humbling
me.
and nice of you to say that. I guess the way I would say it is I appreciate that, and that's very kind of you. I think I probably earned his trust.
Yes.
Through the work product.
I don't want it to sound like Rhett just threw you to the wolves. You were capable of doing these things.
I think so.
Yes.
I think I at the time I didn't think I was. I know now looking back I was, but I was terrified back then and didn't think I was. But you know, Rhett trusted me, and I earned his trust, and then he let me kind of fly. And so I owe him my career, really, is the way I look at it. Because I didn't have any lawyers in my family, and I don't know anybody in New Orleans. I just came here for law school and became friends with all my law school buddies. So it's like, what was my really in to being a lawyer? I didn't have any in. I mean, I had good grades in law school, but I wasn't the top 5% of the class, and I wasn't a law review person. So the big institutional firms weren't interested in me, which is probably the best thing that ever happened to me because I wasn't interested in them. Like monolithic structure that doesn't make sense, but is just like corporate, doesn't really fit my personality. So I didn't want to be in that structure to begin with or in that world. And so it really was, looking back on it, all perfect kind of mix of things and really meant to be.
Yeah. And we always talk about on the episode, on the podcast with other guests and stuff, how big of an influence mentors have as far as where we go in life and the things we do and our success and everything else. But Rhett really was one of those key mentors to you in your career as far as kind of starting out and getting to where you're at.
Oh, probably the biggest.
Yeah.
And really, Rhett wasn't like somebody who his method was not necessarily like continually like building you up verbally. It was how he acted, and like over time, the 4 years I worked for him, the amount of things he gave me to just trusted me to do more and more and more. And so him having the confidence in me and then acting in a way that he had confidence in me by letting me do more and more and more was really what helped me build confidence.
And now you're able to, as a business owner and as a partner in a
do
law
the same
firm,
thing.
it's you passing those things on to that next generation, so you can kind of emulate what you learned there into teaching that next generation of lawyers.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's funny how those things they pass.
It's not lost on me that's kind of turned quickly in my mind. It didn't seem like that. Had a smart person sitting next to me who told me this would happen this quickly. But it is funny, not lost on me how that has turned so much. And then, as you know, at the end of 4 years working with Rhett, there was kind of like this kind of fork in the road for me. Like, do I keep working with Rhett? Do I kind of go and consider starting my own practice? And I just before then, I guess you had left Avery Demarest and were kind of started your estate practice from scratch. Yes. You had no clients and went out on your own and built the business you have now, which is an incredible business. Doing hundreds of estate and succession cases across the state every year. But you didn't have anything when you started at that time. I mean, you left in 2014. And, it was very hard to leave working for Rhett because I still admire him a lot to this day and thought so highly of him. But we were just two different generations and had two different perspectives on how the practice would go forward. And I really wanted to be into all the technology that was coming out at the time. Lawyers listening to this would laugh because Clio, in my case, were like the cutting edge back then. They're still in use and fine and good, but that was at a time in 2014 or 15 where law firms were moving away from hard-based servers and cloud and all that stuff. Law firms are always like 4 or 5 or 10 years behind the rest of the industry
at a minimum,
and accepting change and technology. I don't like Rhett. I don't regret Reg for not wanting to do certain things because he has and had and still has a great practice. He's an excellent lawyer, and he had a certain way of doing things which worked for him, and so we are still, I still think of him as the mentor, and I love running into him and stuff when I see him around the city. But
so you split off from Red at that point. You're kind of going down your own path, and you got a vision for what you want. Talk about that, and how scary is that to do, to kind of get on the edge of the mountain, have to make that jump, and go out there and try to create something that wasn't there before.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
So a lot of entrepreneurs go through that, because that's how a lot of entrepreneurs start their careers. They're working for somebody else, doing those things, and then after that, I'll try to do it myself. Some of them have non-compete agreements. We've talked about in the last show. It prevented them from doing it for a little while. But let's talk about that, kind of like that, making that leap. I'm going to leave the safety net of somebody who's been a mentor to me, who I'm working for, and I'm going to go out on my own. How was that leap? What was the things you were thinking about at that time, and some of the decisions you had to make? How difficult was that?
Yeah, so like most things in life, it's complicated, right? For me, looking back, it was an easier decision process because I'm in my late 20s. I'm single. I have no kids. Not everybody has the same.
Not as much attachments. Yeah.
Freedom, right? And I'm also in my late 20s. Now that I'm in my late 30s, there's a big difference in energy and willingness to do the things I did back then.
Yeah.
I look back and be like, I would never do that again now. You know what I mean? Life circumstances definitely were in my favor, even though I wasn't thinking about it from a 30,000-foot view at that time. But it was still terrifying. I mean, like running your own business and then like not having a income and not knowing anything. I mean, like you don't know anything. Like I still feel like I don't know anything. But at that time, the biggest hurdles are like, how do you decide who's the first person I'm going to hire? How do I get clients? How do I get business? Like, how does this all work? How do I manage my books? How do I do? It's so many different aspects of running a business.
Practicing law and running a business is completely different things, and they don't teach you that in law school.
No, they don't teach you that in law school. And I mean, practicing law is completely different than running a business, but it is a business, and so it's scary. But sometimes you just got to jump.
Yes.
It's that freaking simple. And I knew that I knew in my stomach that I needed to jump, and I was lucky that I had you as a safety net because you had already set up a practice in Metairie and had an office to rent to me. We're like, hey, I got the place for you to practice. Like, I can lease this office to you, and you can open up a computer and go. And so I had you, which was a big piece of it. I don't know if I'd have done it without having that certain level of security. That's an interesting question I'd have to think about. But yeah, it's scary.
It is. So let's talk about a little bit. Obviously now we're at the point where you own a law firm. We have 30 plus employees at this point. We've grown significantly over the last few years. As an operator of a business now this size, what do you attribute the success that you've had? What are some of those hard business lessons you had to learn, maybe, that you can tell people that are listening? Like, these are the things you kind of need to do to make things go forward. So, because unfortunately, a lot of people do what you did. They jump ship or jump out and open their own business, but they get stagnant. They move sideways for years. What do you think is some of the things that really propelled you to get you where you are now?
Yeah, so one of our last couple of shows was a great discussion on that lawyer in California talking about chop wood, carry water.
Mm-hmm.
Look, this is hard, very hard. Like everybody, like doing what we're doing right now in our law firm and doing it the right way is hard. And everybody who it's the E-myth, right? Everybody glamorizes owning your own business and it's wonderful and it's exceptional. Bullshit. There's some good aspects of it, but if you truly care about like building a good culture, having the right people in the right seats, and have a growing business that is doing good things and successful, it's hard. And so for me, it's like those simple things over time consistently, and nobody wants to hear that because it's not glamorous and it's not exciting, but it truly,
those are the things that work.
Is what works. Is like, are you consistently doing the work? Some people, I think, glamorize starting a business because they think like the business owner's life is just wonderful and they don't really have to work. But they look at the business owner 20 years down the line,
see the result, not the process.
See the result and not the process that was very scarred. And even at that stage, the business owner's life, while it may seem glamorous, is still very stressful and has significant financial risk involved. And is not necessarily as easy as it seems to the outside observer. So if you're going into business because you think your life's going to be easy, you're going to be in for a rude awakening because success is not guaranteed and nobody gives a shit. Like the world doesn't care that you are a good person and you're nice and you think you should be successful in business. Like people just don't care. Yeah. That's not how the world works. It's, are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to do whatever it takes to succeed? Not unethical shit. That's not what I'm talking about. But like, do what it takes. Put the time in.
Show up every day and
show
do
up,
what's necessary.
Execute, and do what's necessary.
And that's one of the things. Having watched you grown through this profession and your business, that's one thing I can say about you. You can maybe comment how you develop these skill sets. But you are a person who is very focused, and you're very good at executing and making decisions. And I think that's where a lot of people fall short, is they have a difficult time making decisions, whatever it's going to be, whether they're getting new software or moving to a vendor. They will beat themselves to death making a decision instead of making a decision, executing it. If it's the bad decision, make a new decision and move on. But that's something about your personality that I've seen that I think is really a strong suit, maybe even a superpower of yours. Where do you think that comes from, that decisiveness and that kind of that mindset of executing, that mindset of showing up every day? I got a theory maybe, because I think a lot of people who have sports and athletic backgrounds, who have gone to practice every day and did the summer training and stuff like that, coming from an athletic background, it kind of beats that into your head a little bit. But for you, where do you think you built that mindset? Because I think that really is a big difference or differentiating factor with you and a lot of other people.
Well, that's very kind of you to say that, and I appreciate it. I think part of it is maybe sports. Part of it's my dad. My dad has always been like a worker. Mm-hmm. And Benton and me growing up, it was always like it was like we had a schedule of the grass. My dad invested in some apartments. It was like I was cutting the apartment's grass. I was cutting my grandmother's grass. It was like he was going to find a way to make sure we were working, to instill work ethic in us. That was a big piece of it, I believe. But also, I think from Dad, I also had some drawbacks that I had to learn in the last 3 or 4 years to overcome. One of those being because Dad also instilled in me like being financially conservative and managing money conservatively. It's an interesting like intellectual dynamic between like how does that affect quick decision making in a business?
Yes. Because a lot of decisions we're making, it's the decision on how to allocate resources being money and where those funds are going to go.
And so when I started this business, I was really bad at making decisions. And I would stew over things for months and months and months. And
then I would tell you just go.
That happened for years. It wasn't just that simple. And I really think for the last 3 years, we've really spent a bunch of money investing in business coaching and in organizations that are focused on training you more on the mindset of running and operating a business. And then that has really shifted recently big time for me from the standpoint of like, I've just got to make intelligent decisions on data and information and make them quickly. They're going to be wrong a lot of the time. Who cares? Like the wrong decision quickly is better than the right decision 3 months later.
Well, like I've always said, and I forgot who it's attributed to, I don't know if it was Patton or some military leader, they said there's good decisions, bad decisions, and no decisions. No decisions have killed more people in war than bad decisions.
Fair.
So, there is something to be said about making mistakes, but making them quickly, learning from them, and kind of moving on as quickly as you can. But, one of the things I think is kind of a theme there you were talking about is, growing up, there was a lot of structure. Your dad gave you all a lot of structure. And I think one of the keys to having success in business as well is creating that structure as well within your business, having a framework for making decisions, having a framework or a structure for dealing with issues. I know one of the things you recently implemented in your side of the practice is EOS, or what's called Traction. It comes from the book Traction. But how important is that to have those systems in place and have operating procedures or have what's called the playbook for the business? How big of a critical factor do you think that is for people out there who have businesses, who want to scale, who want to succeed or move from past where they're at now? How much of importance is those systems, you think, to your success that you've had?
So EOS, part of it, right, whether you have Traction or EOS, which I'll talk about in a second, whether you have that or not in your business, like you still have like action items. And there's like, no matter which piece of the company, whether it's here, it's intake, marketing, legal, production, and administration, no matter which piece of the company is doing different things for the company, for the entire team, the organization, like they always have action items, like smaller like projects, like, hey, I have to order some more of that, or we have to replace that piece of equipment in the kitchen, or, there's always action items. Right?
Yes.
And so part of it is obviously understanding that the most, at least in the legal world, but I would argue in almost every world, is the people are more important than the process or the technology. We like to break things down now. People, process, technology.
Yes.
Everything here is a people issue. Every problem we have is a people problem, a process problem, or a technology problem. The people are the most important thing from my standpoint. It's the right types of people who are motivated, who want to be a part of a team, who don't have so much of an ego that it's all about them, and they're focused on execution. And it's a lot easier said than done. Everybody's like, you got to have 8 players. Like, yeah. But,
you have to have processes and systems in place for those 8 players to run.
And the technology that enables them to do their job well.
Yes.
You also have to be humble enough to know when you're wrong, to know when something that you decided to do was the wrong thing, that you need to shift gears. And, 8 players come with problems too. Nobody's perfect. Like, we're all screwed up. Like, we all have issues. We all have egos and personality differences and distinctions. And so part of running a good team is navigating everybody's personalities, making sure that you're coaching them, training them. We're weak on that's one of the things we're really trying to do better on, is implement more training right now. That's a big focus for me and you this year, and that's just like the start of it. Like, we want to develop it further. And so the people and training and investing in them and helping them succeed is, I think, the most important thing. And then traction is, how else can you? I can't believe I ever didn't have it now that we do it this way.
Remember that book stayed in your bookshelf for quite a while.
Yeah, like a year and a half, which is pathetic. But and traction is really simple when you boil it down to it. It's like, hey, make a yearly goal, make a 3-year goal, make a 10-year goal. For revenue, for whatever it is, the widgets that you sell in your business, revenue, what your sale, these 5 or 6 key goals that you want to make for the year, 3 years, and 10 years. And then you break it down by quarters through your leadership team and figure out what are the main priorities, the main 3 or 4 rocks or things that we need to accomplish each quarter. And every quarter you assess where you are reaching the goal for that year, what you've done, what you haven't done. You look at what you didn't do and figure out why you didn't do it. Was there a people issue, a process issue, or a technology issue?
And that's why I called it an entrepreneurial operating system. It's a framework to run your business within. So let's talk about something which I know a lot of small business owners struggle with, is letting go. And delegating. And because, when people think, oh, I want to be a business owner, they think of that guy who's sitting on the beach and he doesn't have anything to do because everybody else is running the show. But to get to that point, you have to go through this phase of, because you're the guy who's responsible for everything. You're the guy who all the clients know. At some point, you got to start trusting other people to do things on your behalf or within your business. It's they call it, I think, in the traction book, is letting go of the vine, so to speak. You personally letting go of things and delegating, what's been your experience with that? What's the advice you can give to other small business owners out there who are kind of struggling with that? And a lot of this goes back to having good systems in place, but that you can trust. But that's one of the hardest things as a business owner, is to delegate and let things go to other people so they can run things for you. What's been your experience, and what would be that advice you'd give people on that?
Yeah, so it's certainly hard as a lawyer, especially if you're like managing your own cases. Is the first challenge is like, how do I get out of the cases and stop being the one doing all the work in the cases? And as a lawyer, most litigation attorneys become control freaks because you're worried about everything the other side's going to do in the case, and you could mess something up for the client. It becomes a very, that's you have to think that way sometimes strategically in managing a case. But I think that most people need to hear that it's just not going to happen overnight. And I'm still going through the process as we grow and add more team members and get bigger, is like letting go of things here and there. And it really is a process, and give yourself some grace and understanding that you can't go from doing everything when you start a business to all of a sudden you're like, okay, like the business coach that I saw on YouTube the other day said you need to delegate to elevate, and so I'm just going to do nothing anymore. That's just like,
it doesn't work that easy.
It doesn't work that easy, and you're going to have to go through the scars of of delegating things to certain employees who let you down and make mistakes that make you feel burned, and then put you in the headspace of being like, well, I'm
Do it
just
all
gonna
myself again.
do it all myself again. Like you got to go. It's a process. Like you've been there. Like you got to go through years of those things occurring to getting to the point to where, you know, whatever it is in your particular business or industry you want to be. And for everybody, that's not the same thing. I mean, some people want to build a business to where they don't have to do anything. They never show up and they just own it and the whole thing runs. Some people, most people, I would say, want a hybrid of that. They want to be involved in the things in the business that they enjoy and hire and elevate other people to do the things that they don't enjoy and or the things that are not the best focus of their time.
Yes. All right, so you obviously wear these two hats, and you had during your career. You're wearing the hat as a business owner, somebody who's trying to build a business, and then you wore this hat as an attorney as well. Let's shift back to the other hat as far as being a lawyer. What's maybe some cases, without going into the specifics, what's some cases out there that you really remember handling that's been very rewarding to you, or you learned some life lessons from, or was just a client that you really connected with, was able to make a difference in their life? What's something like that you're really proud of, or something that really you go back to and you revisit maybe in your brain every once in a while?
Yeah, I mean, one was probably a smaller one. I had some landlords from law school let me handle a property damage case for them. And so kind of like, Rhett just let me like handle the whole thing. It wasn't the biggest case ever. But, you know, surviving summary judgment on insurance coverage and then resolving that for them successfully was, you know, just a neat little thing. It was like the first case I brought in and really handled to resolution. So I still remember that one. I still remember you had a really complicated case that you worked on with me. That was was a first party claim case that had a bit of everything in that case, you like to say. And that case spanned many years. So any motion you could think of that exists in civil litigation in Louisiana occurred in that case. So that was a lot of lessons.
Without naming the clients, that's when you really connect with the clients, though.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And you know,
it made a big impact in their lives.
I like to think so. And you get jaded in this business because you have, or in any business, I suspect, because you get bad clients, and it's the 80-20 rule. You let the 20% who are unappreciative or not thankful for how much you worked and the late nights you put in, or the weekends that you sacrifice certain things to do certain things for them. And then, but 80% of them are thankful and appreciate what you did for them. And these people were just wonderful and trusted me as a young lawyer who didn't know much with their case. And it was, you know, that case definitely shaped how I viewed litigation and understood litigation, and strengthened me as a lawyer significantly. I mean, it had everything. It had like 26 summary judgments, multiple writs,
it's quite a case.
appeals. I mean,
You definitely cut your teeth on that one.
It never ended. So that was like almost 10 cases in one. So
that was a good case. So we got a time machine. We put David today in a time machine. He goes back to David graduating from law school, and he gets to sit down with him, have a beer, and talk to him. What's the advice you're giving him?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually thought about this the other day. The advice would be to have gotten over the reticence to spend and make decisions quickly, faster. Because like there's almost so much time in life. And
there's a clock.
There's a clock for all of us. And if you're running a business that you want to grow, maybe you want to grow it to be 5 people. Maybe you want to grow it to 10 people, maybe 20, 30. Everybody has different goals, right? But if you're trying to grow like sustainable growth, which is healthy, takes time. And it just doesn't happen overnight, because you can't increase the volume of customers and or product that you're going to sell in 3 months and be able to do it well and service them and have the flywheel get bigger. But what you can do is, if you dither on decisions and or negligent from the standpoint, or not negligent, that's the wrong word. Let's say reticent or scared to invest in yourself and in the business, you're going to slow down and stifle your ability to grow.
You got to make decisions with less than perfect information all the time. That's 100%. The thing, and you got to get comfortable with that. And I think it's almost like a muscle. The more you do it, the more used to it you get.
It 100% is.
And you get better at it. But you got to learn by doing.
And just get over making mistakes, because you're going to make them.
You're going to make a ton of them, and you're going to keep making them.
You're going to keep making them. And instead of, you know, there was probably a flip switch for me 3 years ago, which was like, I used to like panic attack when we make a mistake. Like, how does this mistake happen? How does this mistake happen?
It's a learning opportunity.
Yeah. And so it's like, you got to flip it and look at it as like, now I get excited when we make mistakes. I'm like, all right, there's something broken in this business, or there's something wrong I did. And so there's an ability for us to assess what went wrong and make the business stronger, make the muscle stronger.
Is it a people? Is it a process? Or is it a tech issue? It always falls into those things.
Yep.
So, well, very good. So, a couple last kind of question. Books. I know you're a big reader, so am I. What's a couple books that you've read recently, or books that you go back to that you read quite often that would be good recommendations that you'd make for people who are maybe starting a business or trying to go through that entrepreneurial path that you've been down and that you're still on? What would be some resources that you'd point them to?
All right, so we talked about Traction. You should definitely read Traction. That's a nuts and bolts type book, and not like exciting, but it's a must read, number one. And exciting, and also my favorite book is Shoe Dog, the story of Nike and Phil Knight. And so that's an incredible book, and that's my favorite book that I've ever read. So,
inspirational.
Yeah, that's hard to believe is true. Recently, I'm reading like 7 books right now. I do this thing where I read like 10 pages, then move on to the next one, and never can seem to finish one. But I do think what our last guest mentioned is I ordered that book during the show and read it, and it was probably something I should have read 7 years ago, but I read it on the plane the other day. Is Chop Wood, Carry Water.
What was the lesson you got from that book? What was the takeaway?
The lesson is that this is a process. You have to do the basic things consistently over time, and it takes time. Like, you're not just gonna have we don't have a successful business right now. Other people would think otherwise, but like for where we want the business to be, like there is a lot more of carrying water and chopping wood that we got to do at Scott Vicknair to get to the goals that we have for the company. And the main lesson is like, you're gonna make mistakes. It's going to be tedious, but the consistent showing up and learning the lessons and humbling yourself and continuing to move the ball forward will get you to the point of what you're trying to achieve.
It's the small things we do every day that consistently, which have the biggest impacts on our lives.
They're not exciting, they're not whatever, but it is truly
it's the boring things.
Yep.
But it happens. Well, David, thank you very much for giving us a little bit more information about you and your path and your journey to get here to this point. It's been very interesting. Of course, I know a lot of these stories already, but it's good for our viewers to kind of get to know you a little bit better.
I can't wait to take your deposition on the next show.
No,
I'm happy.
We're not doing that.
I'm going to be very prepared as if it was the case. But I hope everybody found it interesting. I find myself to be thoroughly uninteresting. So
we'll close us up here.
Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you, everybody, for listening and talking a little bit about my boring life. Thank you to my mom and dad, who are the most incredible people ever and have enabled me to do everything in life, and I owe everything to. And thank you to all of our listeners who have listened to the Overrule podcast. This is probably like our 30th, 31st episode.
Keep going. Keep doing
and
things.
going. We're enjoying it, and I hope you're enjoying our journey along on the show as well. This has been the Overrule Podcast, brought to you by the Scott Vicknair Law Firm. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, take care.
Scott Vicknair, injury attorneys, we fight for the win.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.